Okay, let's talk about today's heavens in the beginning of July 2020. What we have especially to focus on today is Combust retrograde Mercury in Cancer. Now, Mercury is not usually an important transit planet because it moves too quickly to have significant effect on anything that is transiting, but because it is gone retrograde, it's drawing more attention, and also because the node, Rāhu, the North Node, has just ingressed into Gemini, which is Mercury's domicile, which is the sign that Mercury owns. Therefore, Mercury is getting a spotlight. And so what we actually see is the condition of Mercury right now is highly explanatory to what you're experiencing in society. So first, let's look at Mercury in Cancer. Get a sense for what that's all about. So Mercury in Cancer represents two fundamental clashes. Cancer is a symbol of privacy, and Mercury is a symbol of communication. So Mercury joining with Cancer presents the symbolism of difficulty sharing information, reluctance to share information. Because Mercury is the planet of communication, it's about sensitivity, and Cancer is a very sensitive sign, but because it's basically a clash between the communicative planet and the private sign, you get Mercury in Cancer signifying kind of a polarity between hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity. And so that is really what's going on right now in the world at large. It's very difficult for information to be people can't talk anymore. Everything immediately erupts into an argument because people are either hypersensitive or completely unsensitive, or the combination of completely unsensitive people expressing themselves to people who are hypersensitive. So you're getting flare-ups of anger and everything as well. And then compounding this, of course, is the fact that Jupiter is in Capricorn, making it really difficult to trust anything anybody says. Now, another juxtaposition that presents itself when Mercury is in Cancer is that Cancer is the sign of emotion and Mercury is the sign of intellect. So Mercury in Cancer signifies a thought process which isn't rational. You don't have to say irrational, but it's non-rational. And the mechanism which usually clarifies things to us, our intellect, gets put into this deep water in Cancer, and so it gets unclear. So Mercury in Cancer signifies uncertainty and irrationality, let's say, or non-rationality. And that's also really a clear descriptor of what's going on around us right now. Nobody knows what is going to happen next. Nobody really knows what is even happening right now. Very few people are really thinking about any of the current issues in any sort of rational way. Everything is extremely emotionally charged and extremely hypersensitive and agitated by a completely insensitive party. Now, not only is Mercury in Cancer, but it's also combust, which means that it's too close to the sun to be visible. And the beginning of this month, July 1st, was the exact conjunction between Mercury and the sun. Now, the exact conjunction between a planet and the sun can sometimes be a great opportunity called cazimi, where the planet is described as getting into the heart of the sun and getting energized by the sun. But that only happens when the latitude is also conjunct, not just the longitude. And in this case, that's not the case. So this Mercury combustion does not place Mercury in the heart of the sun. In fact, it places Mercury about 4 degrees south of the sun. So south means subordinate. So Mercury is subordinated to the sun in this combustion. The sun signifies government, kings, authority figures, and the control that they exert. Mercury signifies the way intellect functions, the way communication proceeds, the way information is interpreted, and it signifies youthful people. So what you have by Mercury being combust by the sun, south of the sun, is a symbol of a huge dominance being exerted upon intellectual communication, free communication, and the values that young people have. A huge domination is being exerted upon that by the leaders, the government, etc. Now, not only is Mercury in Cancer, it's also combust, and not only is Mercury combust in Cancer, it's also retrograde. The retrogression of Mercury means that it is separating from its conjunction with the sun. And it's separating rapidly because the sun is moving in this direction and Mercury is moving in that direction. So this signifies that the youth and the free thinkers and the intellectuals are trying to run away from the governments. They're trying to establish their government-free zones. They're trying to establish their freedom and their autonomy from the governments that are in Cancer. The sun in Cancer is a non-functional, not highly functional government. And if you look at where Mercury is, it's in the early part of Cancer, moving retrograde, trying to get away from the sun and move back where? To Gemini. Its domicile, its home. And who's waiting for Mercury right at the door of its home? Rāhu. So what this signifies is the intellectual, the thinkers, the kind of liberal, forward-minded, youthful people are trying to get away from government, get back to some place where they can be themselves. But they're moving towards Rāhu in that way, so they do not feel particularly intellectual or calm or anything. They have a great deal of wildness, anarchy, desire for revolution. So the youth are trying to make a revolution, getting away from the control of the government figures and the leadership figures who just don't understand. Now, the unfortunate thing, in my opinion, is that Mercury is going to fail to get to Gemini by July 13th. So watch the middle of the month for a type of resignation or a slowing down in the enthusiasm of the protesters. Because on the 13th of July, Mercury will cease to go retrograde, cease to try to move closer to Rāhu, cease to try to move closer to its own place in Gemini, and start to follow the sun again a little bit more. Finally, let's also take a peek at what Jupiter and Saturn are doing right now, because those are always the heavy players in transits, because they move so slow. Well, Saturn, over these next few days, is going to complete its retrogression back into Capricorn. So it's going to achieve what Mercury couldn't. Mercury was trying to get back to its home, but couldn't get back to Gemini. Saturn does successfully get into Capricorn from its own place, so it's not as dramatic. And waiting for Saturn in Capricorn is Jupiter, who is retrogressing as well. And being in Capricorn means that Jupiter is debilitated or in its worst mood, its worst function, and is exactly opposite to the sun. So it's putting a 180-degree aspect exactly on that sun. So what does that signify? This signifies that the governments represented by the sun in Cancer are getting a lot of influence from Jupiter at this point. And this is a long-term point because it's Jupiter moving slowly. So it's this whole general period of time that we're in right now. The governments are getting a lot of influence from Jupiter, which would typically be great because you need the government to get influence from Jupiter. Jupiter's morals and law. But this is Jupiter retrogressing in Capricorn. So Jupiter in Capricorn, as we explained in the previous video on today's heavens, Jupiter in Capricorn signifies ill wisdom, misconception, mistrust, dishonesty. So the government is under a huge influence. World governments everywhere are under a huge influence from dishonesty, misinformation, mistrust, it's just inauspicious and bad wisdom. So it's this current sky signifies governments making stupid decisions, making decisions that they'll later regret. And what are these decisions regarding? It's mostly regarding what Mercury is doing and what Saturn is doing. And we just talked about what Mercury is doing. Now what Saturn is doing is it's come back into Capricorn to get closer to aspecting the sun and get closer to Jupiter. So the Saturn is trying to get more power and more influence. So Saturn moving back into Capricorn signifies the people, the masses, trying to get more power and influence in how the government is advised and informed by its effect on Jupiter, by its proximity to Jupiter, and how the government operates by its coming into aspect with the sun. So that's what's going on right now. Saturn is trying to get more influence. The government, however, is being influenced by Jupiter instead, and so is making bad decisions about how it deals with the fact that Saturn, the masses, is trying to get more influence. I'll close with a word or two about what specific things might this particularly affect. Jupiter is the first lord of the USA chart. So the US is a particular focus for these kind of events because Jupiter is a particular player. And Saturn is another particular player. And also Mercury. Mercury and Saturn together really represent Asia. So it can also refer to China. You can be seeing a lot. I mean, actually, right now we all know that America is going nuts, and so is China. Another way to unravel some of the specifics of this interpretation is that Jupiter represents white people, Caucasians, Europeans, and Saturn represents dark people, which is like the Africans. So another thing that's happening right now is that African races, descendants, etc., are trying to get more power, more influence, more stature, more of a place and a say in how things operate and how the government is advised and how the government operates. But the government is more influenced by the white folks, represented by Jupiter, who has the exact opposition on the government, the exact aspect on the sun. Yet these white folks really are not very helpful because it's a debilitated Jupiter. So thank you very much. I hope this video helps you understand a bit of what's actually going on right now.